Well, today the spotlight is on President Tinubu's grand reveal of the 2024 budget. He promised to renew Nigeria's hope. He is also promising economic growth. Well, the budget speech touched on critical areas, spanning economic stability, security, social investment, and environmental stability. Let's take a look at some of the highlights. A 27.5 trillion 2024 budget proposal that he made, emphasis on macroeconomic stability, job-rich economic growth, and poverty reduction. We're looking at prioritization of defense, internal security, human capital development, and education. You can see on your screen there, not debt, recurrent expenditure of 9.92 trillion naira. Look at the details as we go on. Focus on fiscal responsibility, transparency, and accountability. Commitment to a greener future, energy transition still on the table, and global climate action. We're looking at adoption of a conservative oil price benchmark, exchange rate, and a deficit reduction strategy. He also announced plans to finance the deficits through borrowing, through privatization proceeds, so we know what to expect, and multilateral loans. There's a review of social investment programs, fiscal policies to enhance revenue generation. Let's take a listen to what the president said earlier today to a joint session of the Senate.
For appropriation has been themed budget of renewed hope. The proposed budget seeks to achieve job-rich economic growth, macroeconomic stability, a better investment environment, enhance human capital development, as well as poverty reduction and greater access to social security. Defense and internal security are recorded top priority. An aggregate expenditure of 27.5 trillion naira is proposed for the federal government in 2024, of which the non-debt recurrent expenditure is 9.92 trillion naira, while debt service is projected downward to be 8.25 trillion naira, and capital expenditure is 8.7 trillion.
All right, let's delve deeper into the intricacies and the implications of this ambitious fiscal plan by Nigeria's president. We have joining us tonight Professor Adeola F. Adenikinju. He is president, Nigerian Economic Society, former director, Center for Petroleum, Energy Economics and Law at the University of Ibadan. Prof, it's great to have you tonight on the program.
Thank you for having me, Kofi.
All right, and for you, what are the most promising aspects of President Tinubu's budget speech? Okay, Prof, I don't know if you can hear me, but for those of you who are seeing on your screen, we're showing you the highlights, the details of the president's budget tonight, or this morning rather, and it's much anticipated. A total package of 27.5 trillion naira to the 10th National Assembly. This is his first budget. He assumed office 6 months ago. It's an ambitious plan. Prof, can you hear me, sir?
It is going to look at issues around job creation. So it's talking about inclusive growth. We're talking about how do we drive investment to the economy.
Professor Adeola, Professor Adeola Adenikinju, I'm so sorry. We lost you for about a minute. I'm sure due to internet. Yeah, so you have to please start from the top and give us your take on what the most promising aspects of the president's budget is.
Okay, so thank you very much. I said that people are going through a very difficult time. And so when you look at the focus of the budget in terms of, inclusive growth, in terms of creating an environment for investment, in terms of, bringing attracting investment to the economy, in terms of looking at the social investment programs, and also greener growth. I mean, so in terms of the objectives of the budget, I think they're in the right direction.
All right.
Okay, and if you also look at the
Oh, Prof, I'm so sorry. The internet has interrupted your flow of thought there. But I was going to ask you, if you can hear me, what challenges you foresee or you suspect will hinder the successful implementation of this budget. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you. Definitely, I mean, this is a very ambitious budget, and there are a lot of parameters that are outside the control of government. Okay, the budget is predicated on, the value of a barrel of oil at around $77 per barrel, predicated on the quantity of oil we are going to produce. Is predicated on the ability to attract investment into the economy. Is predicated on so many things, amount of, revenue that God is going to be able to raise. Those are very, very, they are like, there are a lot of uncertainties around some of those variables, So it may be difficult, to actually realize some of those ambitious targets, that entail, encapsulated in the budget. And so how we're able to deal with security, for instance, is going to be very, very critical, because that is a major issue that is affecting inflation, that is affecting the performance of the economy. How we're able to deal with issues around inflation, how we're able to deal with issues around the exchange rate are also very critical. So the years ahead are, the year ahead is going to be a little bit tough for both the government and the country.
Okay. Prof, let's look at some key aspects, highlights of the budget and also some key data relating to this budget. What's your thought on the fact that the 2024 Nigerian budget appropriation bill, because not yet been passed, it's not yet a budget, that the appropriation bill or proposed budget, a budget proposal, is 26% higher than that of 2023 that was presented by President Muhammadu Buhari. What accounts for this increase, despite the economic difficulty the country finds itself in today?
I mean, we have to look at the fact that inflation has increased between last year and this year. So in real time, really, the budget is not actually increasing significantly. And also, if you look at it in terms of dollar terms, it's also not a significant increase from what it was last year. So in real terms, in dollar terms, I'm not sure that we have, actually moved significantly from what it was, the budget was in 2023.
All right. Very interesting. He talked about implementing a 12-month a cycle for the budget. What are the implications of that? How important do you think that is?
No, that is very important. You see, because in Nigeria, the budget is very important. Economic agents look at the budget for decision making. Okay, so when you have you're able to remove uncertainties around the budget cycle. Okay, you start the budget January 1, and by December 31, that's the end of the budget. You don't have to carry over, capital expenditure to the next year. You don't have to, review the budget again, during the course of the year. So it is basically to allow for certainty, so that the economic agents are able to make decisions, the basis of the budget, instead of, the uncertainties that we have had in some, in the past.
Interesting. Talking about inflation, which you just mentioned, may be responsible for, the increase of about 26% from last year's budget. The president is expecting a moderate 21.4% inflation in 2024, and that's what they're premising this on. Is this realistic that they can moderate the inflation of the country to 21.4%?
Again, it's going to be difficult, but it's possible. One, the central bank has stated very clearly that the governor stated very clearly that that the central bank is going to focus on tackling inflation, ensuring price stability. Okay, so it means that the central bank is going to deploy all its um, uh, mechanics, all his tools towards ensuring that price level is, the current inflation level, is brought down. So that's going to be very helpful. So if the central bank focuses on, on inflation, price stability, if we're also able to have some stability in the exchange rate, and some of the fiscal discipline that we expect from the government, if we're able to achieve that, then I expect that inflation rate will actually come towards the double digit.
All right.
Towards the value that was going to be difficult. But if they are disciplined, I think it's something that can be achieved.
All right, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. I mean, it's not up to 10 years ago Nigeria had sub 10% inflation, and we all took it for granted. And here we are today. And more of the details, we're looking at, of course, every year, the crude oil benchmark price is what a lot of people look at. Also, the dollar to naira peg, a lot of people look at that as well. So let's quickly look at what this budget proposal talks about. An oil price benchmark of $96 to the barrel, and a daily oil production estimate of 1.78 million barrels per day. Are these what you think is needed for this particular budget, realistically speaking?
Well, I mean, the price of, I think we were looking at around $77 per barrel, as well as the figure that, if it's around 70, if it's below $80 per barrel, then I think that would be a good price. So that's realistic. Though that does not give us too much, elbow room to play. That is very tight, but that's achievable. But the volume of 1.87 billion barrels per day, that may be a little bit difficult. And that's because of a number of factors, the security in the Niger Delta, the pipeline vandalism and theft that have been prevalent in the last few years, and also because of lack of investment. The crisis in the Niger Delta had actually, and also because of the energy transition, many of the IOCs have left. And so the level of investment that you needed in that sector is no longer there. So if you look at the oil GDP ratio down in the last few quarters, it has been negative. The growth rate has been negative. So it's going to be difficult, but it's not impossible. Again, government has to be very disciplined. Government has to up its game in terms of ensuring that we address the current oil theft, pipeline vandalisms, and provide enough incentives, for for operators in the oil sector to be able to achieve that. In the past, Nigeria was doing actually over 2 million barrels per day. In the 80s and the early 90s, we were doing about over 2.3 million barrels per day. So it is something that is possible, but again, there has to be a lot of determinations, purposiveness in what government is doing, and the like I said, the issue of around security and genuine implementation of the PIA and giving incentives to the producers, I think will be very important in achieving that target.
All right, thanks, Prof, for the correction. Actually, it's $77.96 to the barrel for that budget proposal. Let's talk about economic growth. This president has been really big on economic reforms. He touted it, even saying that he deserves to be in the World Guinness Book of Records. A jovial take on what he has done so far. So he's targeting a minimum growth in the Nigerian economy of 3.76% for the year 2024. Is that realistic?
If we look at the recent past, we've been growing at about maybe around 3%. That has been the best we did, quarter one through the 2022. Since that quarter one 2022, I think, the growth rate has been going down. The last figure released by the NBS, which was Q3 2023, we were at about 2.5%. Now, ordinarily, the 3.5% it's not ambitious, really, because the population growth rate now is about 2.7%. So it's not really ambitious. But because we are faced with a lot of crises, okay, that is what is, what the challenge that the government has to ensure that we're able to overcome. We need to overcome issues around security so that we can revive the agricultural sector. The agri sector has been a reliable sector that has been driving growth in Nigeria. When the last few quarters now, it has been at less than 2%, so we need to get this, the food producing areas in the north, the northwest, the north, the middle belt. We need to get security situation under control. And also the Niger Delta, because the oil sector, we cannot normalize the situation where the oil sector has been contributing negatively to growth. It's not normal. So we need to find a way of addressing security issues around those areas so that the agricultural sector can pick up and the oil sector can pick up. Two, we also need to address, issues around the uncertainties in the economy, which has driven inflation, has driven the exchange rates, the weak the poor infrastructure. So these are some of the issues that government has to urgently address if we are going to be able to achieve the 3.5% growth rate that the government. But that's not going to take us anywhere really, because the government is talking about 1 trillion in economy in 2030. We should be talking about growth rate in the upper single digits. Now not 3%. But
right.
There are some challenges. Again, they are not insurmountable if government, puts its house in order and does the right thing.
Okay, let's look at the deficit and two aspects of the deficit. The budget deficit itself and then deficit financing, which for people like me who are laymen, it sounds a bit crazy, but I'm sure you guys in the economic sphere can break it all down for us. Nigeria has been running a deficit budget for some years now, though from these figures we hear that the percentage of GDP from this particular budget deficit 2024, if it's approved, will be about 3.88%, which is lower than that from the 2023 budget, which represented 6.11% of Nigeria's GDP. But Prof, we're having a higher figure. For last year, it was 13.78 trillion naira deficit. This year's budget has 18 trillion naira deficit. So we're still running a deficit budget. So how sustainable is this model of running a deficit budget and of deficit financing, especially this deficit financing strategy of the federal government? We're hearing that the projected debt service for 45% is expected to be about 45% of the total revenue. So I want your thoughts on this deficit financing strategy outlined in the budget. What are the risks that come with this? What are the concerns that should arise from such a strategy? And also the borrowing and loan plan of this particular president and his budget.
Yeah. Thank you, Kofi. You see where we are coming from. The government revenue is very low. If you do it in dollars or in per capita terms, and Nigeria has one of the lowest revenue per capita in the whole world. Even in fact, the whole size of government budget in Nigeria, around $30 billion is lower than the revenue of any of the top 10 companies in the world. If we look at Amazon, it's almost 20 times the size of our budget. So basically, the revenue of government is very low, So in that environment, government needs to borrow. Okay, so there's no way that we can spend government, for example, to cover its to meet its debt obligations, and also be able to pay salaries and then also embark on any capital expenditure or any investment in the economy without borrowing. So the reality is that we need to do a lot to drive up government revenue, and that's what this government has said is committed to move our government revenue GDP ratio from less than 10% to 18% before the time, before the end of this administration. So we need to do that. But in the interim, we need to borrow. The important thing about borrowing is that what use do you put that debt? Okay? That has been the challenge. If you look at government revenue, if you look at government budget, and place it side by side with, development outcomes, GDP growth, inflation growth, unemployment growth, you will see that they are working, they are not working, they are not moving in the same direction. So revenue has been growing. Government borrowing has been growing, deficit has been growing, and yet you cannot see that in terms of human capital development, infrastructure development, economic growth, and employment generation. That is the problem. So if the government can change, can depart from the past, where the debt we incur is not for the current expenditure. Okay, it's not to buy vehicles or to buy, to spend it on wages, but to devote it to capital expenditure or infrastructures or human capital development. Then you can begin to see the payback of those kind of investments in the future. Okay, but so that is the discipline. So in my view, yes, debt is not, the kind of debt we have is not good. But this government has two options because, almost all the revenue that we have goes into almost services of debt, and the little that is left to pay, for the current expenditure. So how do we grow the economy? So, I'm not too worried that we have to borrow. I'm just concerned that this borrowing, the new borrowings and the existing borrowing of debt that we have, commitment we have, we should not prioritize how we spend that money. It must be transparent. I'm very big on transparency. I'm very big on communication with Nigeria. That Nigeria has this debt that we have been killed. This is what we are using it to do so that we can track them. And we can see that genuinely these debts either will pay itself back or it will be used to enhance the productivity in the economy that would generate employment for our children and also help us to have a brighter future in this country. That is where we need to lay emphasis on.
All right, Prof. Now we talk about probity and accountability because you've raised a very important point about the level of recurrent expenditure for Nigeria's budget. And you're saying that, yes, indeed, the government is low on funds, and therefore it has no option than to go a borrowing. And we're spending now, we're seeing 2024, I'm sure it's going to be approved, 45% of revenue going to debt servicing. And we're running 18 trillion naira budget deficit. It's a country that used to run, surplus budget and all that. We had so much money that they had to keep it somewhere or share amongst the states. So how can we ensure, at least, even if we're spending on recurrent expenditure higher than capital expenditure, that there is probity and there is accountability in our financial or fiscal activities in government?
So sorry, can you come back? I think I lost you for a minute.
Sorry about that. So I'm asking for your thoughts. How can we ensure probity and accountability, even despite the fact that, yes, it's the budget is heavy on recurrent expenditure, but how can we ensure probity and accountability? We've all been privy to recent budgetary exposés in recent days.
Well, I think I should mention again that the deficit is not 18 trillion. The revenue is 18 trillion. The deficit is around 9 trillion, which is actually lower than the deficit we had last year. But the important thing, the deficit figure is still within the deficit GDP ratio is still within the fiscal the limit imposed by the Fiscal Responsibility Act. So we are still within the tolerable level. But like I said, and we have to be very careful because in the past, what happened is that the National Assembly will find a way of actually adding on to that debt. Okay, they find a way of increasing revenue and expanding the deficit, the expenditure, so that they can, bring on board some of their own priorities and preferences. So we have to be very careful that the National Assembly does not, necessarily increase that deficit or increase the budget size. Okay, so that we can still ensure that the macroeconomic objectives of the budget, are met. But importantly, what you said is very important. How do we ensure, transparency? The government must, the budget must be published and there must be regular, regular briefs provided by government, by the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, to let us know the progress that is being made. So it should be very periodic, okay? And I also enjoy, professional associations like our own, encourage the civil society organizations and Nigerians, this time to be very, very curious, to be very inquisitive, and to ask questions about the budget. The project, clear the project in the budget to find out whether the state of those projects are they being implemented. And if they are not being implemented, they should make it, they should make it known. Okay, so it is important for to have oversight, on the budget, and it's important for Nigerians also to be very, very active in monitoring and providing, reports as to whether the state of the budget. So we can't afford to just allow the government to just run this economy or run the system the way it likes. We must, as citizens, we must provide the oversight that is necessary.
The House of Representatives recently said that they are promising to engage the citizenry as far as the budgeting process is concerned. I wonder how they intend to do that before they pass the budget. But do you think we need to have reforms, Prof, in the way we draw up the budget proposal in Nigeria? For instance, look at a country like Rwanda, where they actually go down to the grassroots in different parts of the country to do a needs assessment. And based on this needs assessment, they drop the budget. Do we need to have maybe a change in our model to have a budget that probably reflects the needs of the people by having more input from the people at the grassroots?
Last year was it last year or 2 years ago, I was involved in the process of developing the medium-term development plan for Nigeria, the current medium-term development plan, 2021 to 2025. And the process was really very, very inclusive, various pressure groups, various associations and groups were represented in the process of coming up with the medium-term development plan. Now, there are various areas where people can be engaged, and it's not just federal government, because now we are concerned about the federal government budget. What about the state? What about the local government? The citizens will be more interested in what happens at the state level, at the local government level. Okay? At the national level, yes, what the National Assembly is trying to do, because again, the executive draws the budget, okay? Based on certain goals and aspirations that they want to achieve. Now, they bring the budget to the people's house. The parliament is also the people's house, where the National Assembly, the parliamentarians will look at the details of the budget, will re-examine those priorities, will cross-check the values and the figures in those budgets to be sure that Nigerians will get value for their money. And in that process, they can then engage, which is what they're trying to do now, to have a day or 2 days where the budget is open up and various people are invited to come and make their inputs into the budget. I think this is about the first time this has been done. I think it's a good innovation, which we need to continue.
Okay.
So that people will come in, make their inputs, and then that will then help the National Assembly to revise the budget, not necessarily increasing the size of the budget, okay? But as review the budget and come up with with a budget that is reflects the people's priorities, and that can also allow the people to also monitor the implementation of the budget.
All right. I still have a follow-up question on that, but please stay with us. We want to go on a break. When we come back, we'll have a continuation of this conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks to those of you who've been watching tonight. Prof, let's look at some other aspects of the 2023 appropriation bill or budget proposal passed, presented by Mr. President today. What are your thoughts on the focus, on social investment programs and fiscal, let's start with the social investment programs for a bit. Some have said, we shouldn't be spending government money on handouts to Nigerians. And if you remember, some of those social investment programs that were not grants but were soft loans, they haven't recovered them till today. So for a country that is running a deficit budget that is using 45% of its annual revenue to service debts, should that country be giving out handouts to its poor, in quote, and vulnerable citizens?
Yeah, thank you very much. I like what you said in quote. I don't know what we need to do. We can't afford to leave our very poor people and vulnerable people. We can't afford to leave them behind. We can't afford to ignore them. I mean, this country, the economy has gone through a whole lot of shocks in the last few months. You know, the first subsidy removal, the exchange rate, convergence, the high inflation rate that's going in the economy. People are suffering. A lot of people are going through very, very tough difficulties. And therefore, anywhere in the world where you implement those kind of reforms, especially where you remove first subsidy, you need to have palliatives and interventions for those who are extremely vulnerable. Because those people cannot afford, they're already at the brink before. Okay? If you don't do anything for them, they are just going to fall under. They can't afford, they can't withstand it. So what we need to do, and I think they are trying to do that. I mean, the government said, the president said that in a speech, to ensure that those who are going to clean up the program, to make it more, to come up with a register that is credible, okay, that that you can actually track and trace, the poor people receive this kind of palliative. So we need it. We need it. We cannot really leave our poor people behind, because people are suffering. The inequality in this country is very high, and the poverty in the peri-urban areas and rural areas is extremely very high. So we needed support. Okay, though that support, again, like I said, it has to be targeted. It has to be, ensure that it is very inclusive. Those who are genuinely needed that, and it should be there should be a phased-out process that ensures that as people, situation gets better, that we're able to move them into, out of that register. But what is very important, in financing some of these interventions, is that, at times it's not that government has to go and borrow to finance those interventions. Where the tax system works, the poor people, the rich people, the extremely wealthy people are supposed to provide this, the tax revenue, okay, that can be used, part of which can be used to finance, infrastructure for the poor and to finance, direct subsidy for the poor. So it is simply that we have a situation where the very rich and the super rich in this country have been able to underpay that, so a lot of them are not paying the right tax, the right tax that they need to pay. So if they do that, then it is that kind of money that will then be used to take care of the vulnerables and the poor, because we need them. We need them. We need them. And we need to support them.
Yeah, Prof, talking about the social intervention programs of government, the president plans to, graduate the social safety net beneficiaries towards productive activities and employment. As far as you're concerned, what are the benefits of this, or potential benefits, and also potential drawbacks? Because some could argue in some of these economies around the world that we try to emulate, some persons remain on welfare for life. So how possible is it for the government to graduate the beneficiaries of these social safety nets towards productive activities and towards employment?
No, once you start a program like that, you must have a clear exit strategy. That's very important, and that's why in developing those programs, professional groups like ours, the academics, those who are experts in this area involved. So that right from the beginning, you have a plan that also includes, how you can phase out, you don't let it balloon. You don't let, you must keep that spending within a band. Okay, it's not something you want to balloon. Maybe I say, look, I'm dedicating 10% of my GDP or my revenue towards taking care of the poor, to all this kind of investment. So there must be an exit strategy, okay? And again, the government and others have to be very active, the private sector in particular, so that all these people are trained and they acquire the skills that are necessary. We will provide them with, with necessary tools that they need to be on their own, or you get the private sector to engage it, so that they move out of that program, and the others can come in.
All right.
So it can be done by batches by batches. So, but it has to be, like I say, you need to involve, societies and associations that are experts in these areas and the academics.
Okay, Prof, I just want to ask you a very quick question on privatization. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure as the details of, and especially when it is passed, we'll have more time to look at some of those details. But one of the ways the president said he plans to finance the deficit, apart from loans, will be through privatization. He's expecting about 298 billion naira to come in from privatization. Is this the way to go? It seems the president is really pro World Bank, IMF, party. He seems to be thinking in the line of the Bretton Woods institutions. Does Nigeria need to still continue on the path of privatization, looking at what we've had in the past?
Yeah, Kofi, I also share that same sentiment that government has. The record is very clear, and people can dispute that record. People want to argue against that. But the fact is that there's no business that I've seen in Nigeria that government has successfully managed and managed well. I've not seen it. Okay, so if we have this record that all the businesses that government has been involved are not doing well, okay, they have become, like a cesspool of corruption, mismanagement, and where people can steal government resources. I don't think we need to continue in that trend, okay? But we need to have the kind of model that we want to adopt. That's the outright privatization, where you sell out all the assets to transfer to the private sector. You could have what some people have been pointing to as a successful case in Nigeria, which is the NLNG model, where government still has substantial share, but leaves the management, leaves the controlling share to the private sector, and the private sector manages that asset or that company. So the NLNG has been a successful case. So we can use that system, in other privatization we want to do. Like the refineries, for instance, in my view, we have these refineries. Government has been, running these refineries, and they've not been delivering. Prof, so we can't continue that model.
Okay, Prof, we have to go. We have to go. Some would argue that if you look at the likes of Saudi Arabia, which has Saudi Aramco, and other countries, that they keep their institutions, under the government control has been working for them. But you've given us some food for thought that we've failed as far as the government running business goes. Professor Adeola F. Adenikinju, thank you so much for your time. We'll have more time to talk about this budget when it's passed, and between now and then as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Kofi. Thank you for having me.
Right. Well, the president has had a lot to say. We will look for some more time, of course, in the coming days to unpack some other aspects of the budget proposal. From all of us here, thanks for your time tonight on Politics HQ. My name is Kofi Bartels. See you tomorrow.